Welcome, everyone, to the MACC podcast. It's Laurel Hansen, MACC's Program and Member Engagement Director, with another episode of the Workforce Solutions Podcast. This is brought to you by the Metropolitan Alliance of Connected Communities. Interested in checking out more of our podcasts and nonprofit workforce resources? Visit our Workforce Hub on the MACC website. As our listeners know, MACC's been strategically focused on the well-being and resilience of the human services workforce. The people who do the work of our nonprofit organizations are very important to us and to the communities we serve. So on today's episode, we're having a conversation with an amazing MACC member from FamilyWise, Brittany Seidel, Chief Program Officer. We're going to talk about employee development, which is so important, especially in the nonprofit sector. So welcome, Britt, to the MACC podcast. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Britt, we're thrilled to chat with you, a consummate leader from a MACC member, FamilyWise. When we decided to talk about leadership development on the podcast, you immediately came to mind. And I'll let you know, I spoke to some of my colleagues at MACC, and I'm like, who can we talk to? Like feet on the ground, working with teams, working with their organizations. And they said, you got to talk to Britt at FamilyWise. So really glad to have you here with us today. We're excited to dig into this topic with you. It's so important to our sector. And I don't think we've specifically talked about it yet on our podcast, so it's due time. But maybe first, let's get to know you a little bit. Why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners? Tell us a little bit about your role and what you do at FamilyWise, and maybe even just to touch on, if you would, your leadership development journey. What brought you to this work?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am the Chief Program Officer here at FamilyWise. And so that means I oversee all of our parent support services at FamilyWise. Mm-hmm. So that's anything that has to do with parenting and our early childhood education program as well. So I actually started back in 2016. So I just celebrated my 9-year anniversary actually last week. So that's pretty exciting. But I started out in one of our entry-level positions.
Wow.
And totally fell in love with the work. You know, that feeling where you're just like, wow, this is kind of where it's meant to be, where I'm meant to be.
Yeah.
So then after that, just because I kind of had that newfound love for the work of just working with people and kind of that social work atmosphere, I went back to school for social work just to deepen my knowledge of the sector and everything that it entailed, and just slowly moved up in FamilyWise from there. And so now I'm here as Chief Program Officer. And I have learned a lot about what it means to be a leader here, for sure. I've been in other supervisory roles in different kind of spaces and environments before, but I would say the majority of my learning has come from being a leader here at FamilyWise. So it's been incredible, and it's, been a fun journey. And I honestly truly have a passion for this sector. So
I love that. I love that story. And talk about really demonstrating a great example of employee development in our nonprofit sector, right? Yeah. So you came in, learned the ropes, and now you are the Chief Program Officer. So you've lived it.
I have. I've lived it. I started, on the ground with families, learning the work while I was doing the work, building the bike while riding it. And I've just learned a lot here. I have learned a lot here, and I've had really great mentors here, which have really supported me in that development to kind of be where I'm at today.
That's wonderful. Mm-hmm. I think you've touched on something that's so key in organizations to help employees, grow within their work and move forward. And so I'm really looking forward to talking to you about that. So I read an article recently, and I'm kind of curious what you think about this. And I don't know why this is. 20 to 30% of nonprofit leadership positions are filled through internal promotions, compared to 30 to 50% in for-profit organizations. What is the deal there? Why do you think that is? Why this great difference between our sectors?
I find that super interesting, just because at our agency, it does feel like quite the opposite. Just all of our leadership, our management positions, they're all of people that kind of started like how I did. So I found that really interesting. Specifically, I think why it works so well to kind of have those internal promotions is this sector in general is just super intricate, right? Like, especially nonprofits, our agencies have a lot of moving pieces to manage and to triage on a day-to-day basis. So when you have a staff that has that foundational knowledge of programming, onboarding into leadership tends to be a smoother transition because they kind of know a huge aspect of the work already. And a huge indicator of upward movement, at least like for me and what I've seen in our agency, is kind of that mission and vision alignment and the true passion for the work. And we see that at most of our staff. And so it really is interesting that the stats kind of talk differently, right? But something that I could maybe speak to that is this work is really, really tough. Burnout exists, especially at the management level and the leadership level, where again, you have so many moving pieces and you're triaging so many things on a day-to-day basis that it is really hard. It's a really hard job, right? And so I could see potentially that burnout could be part of that percentage of not having that longevity, which kind of goes into probably what we're going to be discussing today, really about that. How do we support that growth and that professional development to offset that burnout and allow people to grow deeper in the work and not away from the work?
Wow, I think you've tapped into something there. I appreciate you started out by talking about the intricacies and complications of the work that we do, right? Yeah. It's not straightforward and it is challenging. And then you brought up burnout, and we also like to talk about it as compassion fatigue. Right. We have compassion, but when you can't solve all the problems, that can really lead to long-term compassion fatigue. And something that we talked about at the last MACC Summit as well, compassion fatigue and how to address that. Right. So I think you've tapped into that. I think it's interesting, though, that FamilyWise has taken the path of prioritizing internal promotions and really what it takes to develop employees to move them along on that path. So we absolutely have the right organization with you here talking about this, because you're walking the walk and talking the talk. Yes. How does FamilyWise invest in employee development? So, and I'm curious, have you seen an impact from those investments? Any examples you can share? You've talked about yourself, but like, what does it take at FamilyWise to move the needle on this?
Absolutely. I think something that's really special about our agency is that we put a huge emphasis on our agency culture. So ensuring that all of our staff and programming are aligned with our mission and values. And we have conversations with every single staff, about professional development at least twice a year, formally. And then, but it happens more than that. So I think really when we're talking about how do we create that space for staff to feel confident and competent in their work, to be able to dive deeper into that agency. And so, a couple of things that we've done is, we put a huge emphasis on professional development. We're talking to staff and having them identify goals for themselves. And that really ensures that they're accountable for their development, but it also holds us as supervisors accountable to ensure that they have the resources and opportunities available to them to actually complete those. And then I would say the other component is just the emphasis on reflection and the emphasis on training. So a huge value of ours is the ability to grow and learn. So education and growth are a huge part of what we do in our everyday. So we see that staff find value and then more confident in their work. And I think it's, when you feel good at work, you want to stay there and you want to grow there. And, when you feel like you have friends, when you feel like you have people around you that are like-minded and we're all moving the needle towards something, we all share that mission and share our why. It makes you feel very grounded. And the more we kind of reflect on the work and why it's important with one another, the more connected you feel. And that's what creates the company culture, right? And so I think I would put the biggest emphasis on the culture that we've created at FamilyWise. And that makes people want to stay. It makes people want to grow because we also don't look at mistakes as, oh my gosh, what type of performance improvement plan do we have to put you on? It's like, what can we learn from this? This is a learning opportunity. So I think we also just have the view of mistakes are part of the learning, and how do we ensure that you feel comfortable and confident to grow here?
Gosh, so much to unpack. I have so many questions, but I mean, I feel like this is a master class, like you said, on what kind of culture makes people want to stay, grow, and do their best work. And I see our sector focusing so heavily on the work that it maybe gets a little out of imbalance in terms of focusing on the people who are doing the work. Right. And yeah, it's a lot, and it's a lot to try to do both simultaneously, but focusing on the people really lets them do the best work. So yeah,
you have to invest in your staff, right? They're the ones that are on the ground doing the hard work with families. And if they don't feel like they can, or if they don't feel like they have the support from their supervisors, how do they feel confident to be able to make those tough decisions when they're with their families, right? So I think it really is investing in the people. And that's something that we, truly value.
Yeah. And when you talked about the space and the ability to make mistakes and to have that culture of trust, it makes me think of what we understand is the most important factor in a successful workplace, which can be a psychological safety environment where you feel safe to try things and to make mistakes and to learn and to grow. And then those are actually the things that move you forward in your work development, right?
Oh, absolutely.
You won't be ready. You won't be ready for the next step if you haven't sort of tested yourself.
Exactly. And I think, that is, I love that you bring that up, because it is creating a safe space to explore, right? So you're trying to understand not only, the agency and how this works, but the family and yourself in the work too. So I always tell our interns when they're coming in, I'm like, you're going to learn a lot about yourself when you do the work. And it's staying in tune with that, because that's also the growing as well. And so I think it's having that attunement with, what are you doing? How am I responding to it? How do we work towards this? And, create a safe space to explore those feelings and emotions that are coming up and talk through them. And I think, again, that is also what offsets the compassion fatigue that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah. So you've talked a little bit about this already, the role organizational culture plays in whether staff feel ready to and supported to move forward. But what do you think are the key steps in terms of really getting somebody ready to move forward in their development?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I always think about, why would someone want to move forward if they have hesitations or they don't feel supported, right? So I think when staff are interested in internal promotions, it's because they want to feel connected and confident in their ability to make that long-term commitment to growth at an agency. And I think it's super important as supervisors and leaders to truly support that in every way possible.
Is it for everyone?
No, absolutely not. I mean, I think that we have some extremely experienced people that do direct service, then that's where their heart is. And they want to stay in the work with families. I think something that, kind of to speak on a former example, we have, I promoted a direct service worker into a manager a couple years ago, but her heart was with the families. And so she was like, how do I go into this leadership role, but I still have this huge part of the work that I just so love doing? And so as an agency, you kind of think about, what does a manager's role look like then? Can we flex what the role looks like to ensure that this staff is happy doing the work? So we updated her job description, so she gets to keep families and keeps to doing the work, but also gets to supervise a team and hop into that leadership role. And there's some people that just don't want the leadership role, and there is nothing wrong with that. I think you know what you like, and we support that. And there's different ways to grow versus in your work that doesn't necessarily mean going into leadership or management, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it is whatever that growth looks like to them. That's what we try to make happen for them. So for this example, we changed your job description to where you get to be a manager and you get to be with families. You don't have to lose your favorite part about your job just to have a promotional opportunity. So we're flexible and we're adaptable, and that is just like true to the work from the ground up and the top down. So I think it's just being very responsive to the needs of your staff and, being mindful of what is feasible, but, doing our best to meet the needs.
Yeah, I love that. You're talking my language when you start talking about strengths. And, we can learn so much about understanding our own work strengths. And it's always, you always want to invest your time and energy and priorities in what you're good at, not always struggling with maybe what isn't your strength. So I love that. Mm-hmm. You talked about the top down, the whole environment, and this is just a little bit of an aside question, but how do the executives in your organization support that culture? Is there anything that they've done to demonstrate or reflect on a culture where staff development and moving forward is a part of the DNA there at FamilyWise?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's intentional initiatives, right? So part of our strategic plan is culture of reflection, specifically so that we can send the message to everyone at the agency that this is important. Us connecting our agency culture, us remembering why we're here doing the work. It is so important for us to keep going and to be able to do the work that we need to do. So we have done, not only is it a part of our strategic plan, but we have made initiatives to ensure that staff have time and space to do it. So, we have cohorts where everyone gets together and is able to case consult or talk about, the why and values and actions. We, have yoga. We had yoga for a little while where people could come and just connect with one another in a different, kind of way. We do stress reduction workshops. So it's initiatives around how do we really just make it known that it's okay to sit and reflect and to remember your why and to de-stress and to connect with one another, because we're all human, and that is like the biggest part about this work. And so it's not only us like creating initiatives in space, but it's also modeling it ourselves. So what are we doing to say, hey, this is what we find value in, and how are we showing up as leaders to model that to everyone else? So I think those are just a couple of ways of just being very intentional about sending the message to, to our staff that this is what we value.
Yeah, I love that. We're in human services, right? So why wouldn't we bring that human service lens to our own workplace culture?
100%.
Yeah. Even though it's hard. And I think what I really like about what you said, the FamilyWise approach is it's so intentional. Yeah. Right. You don't just like, it's not just like, it'll just happen. It'll just, evolve and happen, where it's really thoughtful and strategic and planful. And, I guess you get what you plan for.
Right. Yeah. And I think too, it's when you have those intentional initiatives or those intentional spaces for people to have that, it almost gives like the okay for staff to just be able to, in their workday, take a minute, right? I think when you say it without creating the space, you're not necessarily, giving the okay, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it is really important that we like create that space for staff so they feel like it is accepted.
Yeah. Maybe you could share some examples with us, the types of experiences, projects, and responsibilities that seem to be really effective in preparing internal staff to step into new roles, right? So now we're getting sort of into the nitty gritty. And I think our listeners are tuning in they kind of want to hear what another organization is doing and how they're making some things happen. Any examples or ideas that you'd share?
Yeah, I think just kind of an overall kind of broad example is just creating depth of bench in your programming. Because not only does it support the agency as a whole, but it provides staff different learning opportunities that they may not receive in their day-to-day. And that might look like, one of the managers is doing billing and they want to loop in one of their staffs to to train them in on how to do the billing aspect and understand the structure of nonprofits and how does this get pulled and where does this go. And it's offering learning opportunities, but also creating, if that staff, it's also creating succession planning, right? So it's a dual purpose. And so sharing that knowledge and not having, I think in nonprofits, we get in it's very easy to do this. And it's a dangerous space to be in, where you have one person holding a lot of knowledge in their brain. And then if that person were to leave, that knowledge leaves with them. And so being intentional about how do we create systems and documentation for the very important information that lives in every one of us. Mm-hmm. And that's by sharing it with your staff or documenting it properly. It's making sure that your knowledge is shared. And I think that it just creates a really easy, if there was promotional opportunities, oh my God, this person already knows XYZ. Wow, this makes so much sense. They love this part of it. They're going to apply. They're really interested. Or this person's on maternity leave who steps in. Oh, wow, this is just so much easier because they already know this. So it just creates a lot of ease and flexibility within the program, but also gives the staff so many different learning opportunities. And it helps them to explore what they're interested in. Oh my gosh, like I'm going to do the billing. Wow, I hate billing. I don't want to do this. Yeah. So it really allows that, again, safe space to explore, where if you make a mistake, no worries. Like, we got you. We now know that that's not your shtick or your thing. So I would say that's probably the biggest one.
Well, there you go. There's a benefit of the fact that we're, as nonprofit organizations, a little smaller than your average, maybe giant corporation. We have a little bit more nimbleness to be able to do some of those things. And yeah, I think that's brilliant. It sort of is win-win, right? It helps the organization, it helps the individual. And also, I would imagine as a team member, the fact that somebody would have that level of confidence in you is pretty inspiring.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, and again, it goes back to building their confidence, because once you do learn a little bit more about maybe some of our day-to-day of what our managers do, you have a little bit more understanding of what your supervisor does. But it also starts to connect the dots too of like how a nonprofit functions, right? Mm-hmm. So when you get a little bit of insight into kind of these closed doors or these previously closed doors, you start to really, things start to make sense and dots start to get connected. So I think it's, building the confidence in the work as well. Like, oh, wow, now I know why this, and you know what I mean?
Yep. So, some transparency. And
yeah, exactly.
Gosh, I just think that's brilliant. I love that. I love everything about that. Okay, so we know that you're committed to opportunities for advancement, but are there any special considerations you put into making sure that these opportunities are both accessible and equitable at FamilyWise?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think first and foremost, all promotional opportunities are announced to the whole staff, like the whole agency. So if you're in a different program and there's a promotional opportunity in another program or a different department, you still have the availability and the knowledge versus, sometimes when internal promotions happened, someone's identified and they're chosen. So I think it is being equitable of, in that way. I think we're also having conversations and we're aware of who is interested, and through professional development goals and having those conversations, we know, the specific interest of our staff. I think we're also very mindful and intentional that we honor lived experience outside of, just educational background. We ensure to work with and advocate for promotions regardless of background. And I know that us as FamilyWise, we've done a lot of work because sometimes, our hands are tied with contracts of, you need to have this specific educational background to work in this contract, which does put a lot of barriers on certain people to be able to work in certain programs or under certain contracts.
Sure.
And we've worked really hard with contracts to change that. Saying, lived experience is so valuable, and how do we ensure that value? And we've actually gotten a few contracts that shifted and counted. And it's been really cool. It's been really cool. And I think it just goes to show too that like we're an agency that goes to bat for our staff. And that, whether you went to school and like, I went to school for social work, but I also know that someone with lived experience honestly knows probably much more about the families that we work with than I would. And so where is how do we honor and value that? And so it is a lot of just kind of ensuring that regardless of the background, we honor your experience, whatever that looks like, to ensure that anyone can get the training and anyone has the opportunity to have that promotional kind of move in the agency.
That's wonderful. Thank you to FamilyWise for advocating for that.
Yeah, it was really cool. It was a really cool experience.
That's something that can go a long way in our sector and really, inspire and help other MACC members as well.
Absolutely.
So it's been a great chat. We have just a little bit of time to wrap up with a final question, but I also want to just put a shout out to you. You're just such a wealth of knowledge and experience. So just want to give a shout out to the MACC Network. Britt is the one to reach out to if you want to chat about this some more, if you have some questions. We've got such great people in our network that our colleagues that we can connect with and support each other.
Yeah, thank you. And feel free to reach out. This is a topic that I do love talking about. So,
So just as we wrap up, what advice would you give to other nonprofit leaders who want to build this culture of growth and create these intentional pathways for internal promotions? It sounds like at FamilyWise, you're all in on this. What advice will you leave our listeners?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is just know your staff. I think we live in a world too that can be so isolated, and everyone wants to work from home, and but your staff are working on the ground with families and know them, get to know them, talk about professional development, know which staff want to lead and which ones want to work with families. It's understanding your agency needs and being creative with development. So thinking about your org charts as your community's needs shift, right? Because we are working in a constantly moving environment. And so it's how do you shift with that? We have the flexibility of in nonprofits to, be creative in our solutions. And I think the biggest thing is just talking to your staff, getting feedback from your staff. What does development look like to you? What does a promotional opportunity look like to you? What does growth look like to you? And then create that space for them. And I think it is about intentionality and just knowing your staff and I think really living in your mission and in your values as an agency and making sure that your staff also do the same. That creates such a great culture of growth. And then things kind of go from there. But there is intentionality. There's a lot of doing, not just a lot of hoping. So
Right. Oh my gosh. Well, that's amazing. And like I said, we're definitely talking to the right folks. FamilyWise has really made this top of the list priority at your organization. So thank you so much for this terrific conversation. Brittany Seidel from FamilyWise, thanks for your time and the conversation with the MACC Network. It's been really a valuable discussion. Thanks for sharing, Britt.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks also to our sponsor of the Workforce Podcast, the Ameriprise Foundation. Listeners, we appreciate you. Thanks for tuning in. Don't miss MACC's monthly podcast episodes. Find us where you listen to podcasts on Apple, Spotify, and Podbean, or find our episodes directly on MACC's website and Workforce Digest. Have an idea for a MACC podcast guest? Reach out to us. Thank you all. Have a great day and be well. Goodbye.